Ugh. This? Again? Ugh. Dear baby Jesus, how do I end up in these situations? Grazie Dio. Oh my God. So the equation may indeed share a lot with a Prius Prime, but in reality, that's about where the similarities end. This is much closer to a Porsche Cayenne Turbo SE hybrid. Basically, it is the same platform, same engine. This is just tuned to a completely different, more ridiculous level. 789 total system horsepower and 701 pounds of torque. Now, how does it do it? Basically, what's happening here is you still have the 4-liter twin turbocharged engine, but they add a 141 kilowatt electric motor, which, if you look at the actual usability of an electric motor, it's not about, oh my God, this is green and I'm gonna get better fuel economy. This, at best, does 18 mpg. It adds 30 miles of electric driving range because it is a plug-in hybrid. In reality, it adds about 400 pounds of torque. That's the benefit of this system. It's instantaneous torque, and it weighs as much as a BMW M5 Touring, which is to say, this really needs to go to Weight Watchers. It's over 5,500 pounds. Now let's go back to that whole plug-in hybrid bit. 25.9 kilowatt hour battery, which sounds all fine and good until we get to the very obvious question. Why the hell is that important to you and I on a vehicle that has one of these? This is where we get to playing niceties with government regulators. You see, one could use this in congested cities as an electric vehicle, then as God intended, going from city to city, or in reality, like we're gonna do today, take it to canyons. Now, putting all that aside, we arrive at something that I did not at all expect, a drastic change in the way the vehicle looks. Now, there's a very technical term in the car world for this, a mid-cycle refresh, but here there's something different going on. These, I've always felt they look a hell of a lot like the vehicle on which they're based, the Audi RS-Q8, but they're double the price, so they should look more different. Here, what they've done with the hood, by making it softer, it's almost like a waterfall look to it, it brings the proportions together and makes the vehicle look very different than any Audi on which it shares components with. So you and I, we already sort of covered the weight on this thing, around 5,500 pounds. Now, why do I say around 5,500 pounds? You see, discussing weights and measures with Lamborghini is always challenging because they're the only manufacturer that quotes their vehicles as dry weight. You and I both know that is useless because how are you going to move any vehicle without fluids in it? So rather than focusing on the overall weight, let's focus on the delta between this and the last Urus you and I drove. That was over 600 pounds lighter. So there's the penalty of a second propulsion system. Speaking of second propulsion system, let's go back into gas, sport mode. Oh man, yeah, there is a noticeable difference. The instantaneous torque from that electric motor, it's, what we discussed, almost 400 pounds in addition to what's coming out of that gas engine, and it transforms even a 5,500 pound vehicle. Now there's a trick going on here. This thing has 7, count them, 7 modes, yeah, one of them being EV. There's of course the off-road modes, I would be shocked if anybody takes one of these things off-road. And it's the sport mode that makes all the difference. That's the one to focus on. And there's a reason for that. Yeah, it changes the throttle mapping, so it's more immediate in terms of delivery of power. But really, it's a better dance. It's a better interaction between the engine and the transmission, where you're getting gear shifts quicker, but not to the point where it rattles your intestines. Like, for example, let's go into Corsa. Now here, this is reminiscent. I've ever driven an R35 GTR. That's the gear shift here. But this, not the ideal choice when trying to push this thing around canyons. Maybe for like the less than 1% are gonna take it on a track. Hopefully we'll understand each other, so let's dispense with this R35 foolishness, cycle back into sport mode, get to the headline. You see, the engineers in Santiago de Bolognese say that a choice. They could have said, Porsche, what do they know about hybrids and SUVs? And throughout all of that learning, or they could have just stolen it, all that know-how, put it into their plug-in hybrid. And that is clearly what has happened here, because this has all the goodness of a Cayenne Turbo SE hybrid, whatever you want to call it. This to another level. It just has more power. It's tuned much more aggressively, to the point where normally when someone presents us with, oh, here, we're grafting on a second propulsion system because the government says so, that's usually a bad thing. In this case, at least in terms of delivering power, that is not a bad thing. So a topic you and I don't normally focus on when we're discussing Santiago de Bolognese, reality, or in this case, practicality, but it is germane to the discussion because of the second propulsion system. Now, you and I could talk about charging times. I'll just cut to the chase. It's slow, 7.2 kilowatts. It doesn't even have a DC fast charging, but that's not important here. This thing was designed to get around taxing schemes in Europe. So really, if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, the use case is having a charger at home. But here's the surprising part. It doesn't really need to be level 2. Like, I charged this level 1 at home, and it was 7 to 8 hours, and that's 25.9 kilowatt hour battery. This on level 2, they quote it like 4.5 hours. Okay, so that's all fine and good, but let's put it aside because I found a completely different use case here. These things without an electric motor have the fuel range of a toy pedal car. Like, for example, if I were to take one of these things out to the canyons back on a normal day, it's about 150 miles. The tank would be bone dry, and that's filling it up before I go out there. This, using like sort of hypermiling, meaning going back and forth between EV mode at prudent points, and then hitting the recharge immediately, I'm back here with more than half a tank in a Lamborghini Urus. I get it. You're worried. An extra 600 plus pounds on an already heavy vehicle going to make this thing a mess going around corners. Turns out that is not the case. A standard Urus. All of the learning from Lamborghini and basically the platform on which this is based, which is shared with the Bentley, the Porsche, the Audi, we've covered this. All of that learning plus the Lamborghini tuning on top of that to make this stiffer. Then they add an electronic limited slip differential to the back, then carbon ceramic rotors, and all of it comes together to the point where it's manageable. Forget about like the details of all the bits I just covered. This is the kind of vehicle where I actually do want to push it aggressively. I feel confident as I get around this corner here. I feel like the brakes will back me up. I feel like the brakes perhaps too much around town. And then something else that's unusual, this is kind of begging for you to interact with the transmission. I do want to change the gears here, and that's really what's going on here. This is a plug-in hybrid that, damn, I get it. I'm not going to argue with you about two propulsion systems. But I guess the learning here is maybe it needs to be in a large package like this where you can hide some of that weight. So yes, it is indeed that time again to play your favorite game, the options game with a Lamborghini. Now, it's always challenging to do this exercise with a Lamborghini because they have so many options that are mind-numbingly expensive. This one has 25 to 30 options. So today we're going to focus on just a couple of options that make this particular build stand out. We start with the base price, $258,636. That is about $30,000 more than the last time we checked in on an Urus S. To that, we talk about the paint color. Now, usually Lamborghinis, there's some sort of color where you're driving around with your hair on fire. This, thankfully, is a mature color. It's blue. It's an odd name, Blue Uranus, something like that. Excuse me for butchering the pronunciation, but you must be mature to afford it because it is the equivalent of a good used car, $13,384. Then we press on to a number of other options that, if we put it all together, it is the equivalent of a Porsche Boxster or like a new Corvette with some options, about $79,000 in total options. The wheels, of course. You'd think wheels would come as standard. They do, 21 inches, but if you want 23s, which you must have, $5,800. Then you bought yourself almost a $250,000 car. One would think you'd have a sunroof as standard. One would be wrong. You'd have to pay an additional $4,000 for a panoramic sunroof. Now, yes, there are a number of other exterior options, but you and I must press on to the interior because that's where this battle is won and lost. And when I say battle, really making a custom build. That's what's special about vehicles like these or the crazy Porsche builds. Yeah, you could laugh at the prices, but that's why the vehicle stands out, because you have a car that nobody else has. And one of the things that was done very well here is a two-tone interior, the black and white leather with some of this contrast stitch. It's fantastic. It better be, because that's an additional $6,000. Then if you spent that kind of money, you have to have it bathed in carbon fiber. That's an additional $8,000. Then if the interior looks very cool, it has to sound cool. So one must have the better stereo, the Bang & Olufsen stereo. That's an additional $7,500. Then we press on to an option that really stands out for me, and this is the option. And I kind of equate this to the fire extinguisher in Porsches in that it brings pageantry and fun to the interior. One can have the door handles anodized in different colors, in this case red, which is a great contrast to the build of this car, and that is a bargain at $884. That is the option I would absolutely go for. Then one must pay $4,000 destination handling from Sant'Agata Bolognese, which brings the total price to $341,708. Now, before we wrap up this little exercise, I wouldn't blame one for thinking that floor mats come with an almost $350,000 car. But once again, you would be foolishly mistaken, because you must pay extra for floor mats. In this case, $718 extra. They are lovely because it's a two-tone contrast thing. But here, I want to share a little bit behind the scenes with you guys. These cars, they're all owned by the manufacturers and loaned to us, but they're delivered. The logistics are handled by a company locally here, in this case, Drive Shop, and we've been dealing with Mark and Ugo for 15, 16 years now. Ugo, fantastic. He's kind of like the high-end driver. He's the one that only gets to drive these kind of vehicles. So he's got this trick where he not only vacuums the floor mat, he carries this brush in his detail bag and he runs the brush up and back in different directions to give you these lines on the freshly vacuumed mat. It almost makes you feel better for paying $718 for floor mats. So to Ugo, I say, grazie mille. Okay, so enough of you and I having all this fun. Let's grow up, become mature, switch into EV mode. This is the 7th of the 7 modes. It doesn't interact with other bits you can change. A couple of moving parts. Number 1, you can change the gears on this. Number 2, this works up to 81 miles an hour. And number 3, there is a recharge mode. Now, the recharge mode obviously works when we go back into gas. Let's go into any one of these gas modes. And then here I can select from a hard button, thank you very much, a recharge mode. And this way, as I'm driving aggressively, which we've been doing this entire episode, I've been charging the batteries. We've reclaimed about 3/4 of the battery in this up and down the hill while discussing driving dynamics. Now, as we interact with all this stuff here, let's go back into EV mode. This brings up an important point about Lamborghinis and UX design. So I have gone into this tangent of things that piss me off, where I talk about UX design and too many screens, and sadly, my beloved Porsche, they have fallen victim to this. They've got screens here. Now, even in a 911, there's a screen here. We've got push buttons instead of ways to turn the car on with fake keys. These guys, they kind of know who they are, and I applaud them for it. Like details, these 3 things here, it's very easy to interact between the EV and the gas. So I want to switch to the gas, I go here. I want to go back to the EV, I can go here. Now on the flip side, not everything is that intuitive. If you want to put the car in drive, you don't go like this or like this. You have to use the paddle shifters, even though you're not using the paddle shifters to change the gears while you're driving. Overall, this is kind of like a mishmash of we are Lamborghini. We are an impractical Italian car manufacturer, and we do so at a boutique level, mixed with Audi, which is the technical company that they are connected to, even though it's part of the Volkswagen group. And then you have the ridiculousness of some of these screens. Of course, I'm gonna piss and moan here. Can we have some real gauges? The car's 350 grand. This is saving money. I don't want to see this. I want to see beautiful, like IWC, Breitling. Pick any one of these watchmakers from Switzerland to make this work. I guarantee you, if Lamborghini were to offer that $20,000 option, it would be like a 90% take rate. As a matter of fact, comments below. A real buyer of this, would you actually pay extra for real gauges instead of this screen? I'm going to say the quiet part out loud. Us car folks, we do not like change, especially the kind of change that is force-fed down our throats by governments around the world. However, I am man enough to admit when I am wrong, and this is one of these very rare cases where I am wrong. This, splicing a second propulsion system into what is supposed to be a Lamborghini, it works. It works quite well, as a matter of fact. That is all I have to say on the subject. This is the point of the episode. I turn around to you guys to opine in the comments below or via our social media, MotoManTV, all one word, MotoManTV, all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, I do want to share a personal Lamborghini story with you guys. You guys know I'm not into these cars, I'm into Porsches. However, I have a nephew, love him more than life itself, yet he is a Lamborghini guy, no matter how much I try to change him. And when he comes to visit, he always says, "Can you book a Lamborghini?" Well, last summer, I was given the task of taking him to a military summer camp. And his father called me and said, "Don't you dare book a Lamborghini. I don't want him turning up in one of those cars." So what did I do? I booked a Cayenne Turbo GT. If you know, you know. Until I see you in the next episode, bis später.